Hello, everyone. We are ready to get back started. Hopefully, you guys had some really good lunch, Chipotle, McDonald's, what else? All unhealthy options at the LaFont Plaza. But hopefully, you guys had a good lunch and also got a chance to meet someone new that may be not sitting at your table. We want to go ahead and get started. I know folks are still trickling in. Because we have our next topic, which we're going to talk about, effective case management. And so I'm going to invite back up Allie Hall, who's going to talk about effective case management. And at the end of her session, we're going to also invite up Tasha Dyson, whom I can introduce, and she's going to talk a little bit about case management as well.
Thank you, Trey, and welcome back, everyone, from lunch. And as we're getting started, and I hope lunch was wonderful for you. As we're getting started, I wanted to see if we could give a round of applause for the broadcast production team, who has done an incredible, and previously unsung job. So we're going to thank them. Yeah, y'all are good. Okay. So anyway, we have a little bit more to think about with regard to case management. And so when I sent in these materials, Dina had requested them by a certain date, and I sent them in, and she says there's a problem with your case management slide deck. You have a question mark after case management. Did you really mean that? And I said, oh, yeah, no, I really meant that. She thought I had a punctuation problem, but I don't. I really do mean that, because it's an inquiry I hope we can have together. The words we use to describe what we do, what we say about what we do, and what others say about what they think we do really actually kind of makes a difference. And so just to take a few minutes to consider this, I did a little study about the comparison of case management and coaching and guided conversations and different things like that, and I found this super handy case management flow chart, because I know this is what we want to do, right? We're like all for this, aren't we? If this is what we're doing, yikes, right? And so yeah, we may just really kind of need a scorecard to make it through our day. And we may, in a way, may be overcomplicating things. It may just really be a different way of conceptualizing our conversations with people that could be a little bit more helpful. Embedded in a traditional case management approach are some assumptions that look kind of like this. I'm the expert here. In fact, I'm the only expert here. My job is to collect information about you. If I collect enough information about you, it equals understanding you. Like if I just collect enough facts about you, I'm going to get your perspective. People end up looking like a collection of problems for the case manager to solve or fix. Sometimes we devolve into offering frightening or warning information as a way to try to light the fire underneath people. And if we just clearly tell people what to do, everything's going to be okay. In fact, if people aren't doing what we think they should do, it's a problem with our direction giving that we assume. And so if people aren't, then we just turn up the volume or just tell them again and again. And information alone in and of itself does not change behavior. It's the person's response to the information that determines which way they're going to go. But anyway, all that stuff. If you could take about 2 minutes together to pick one of these embedded assumptions and come up with at least 3 downsides. Just pick one of them and discuss with your partners here maybe some downsides of approaching a person in this way. All right, ready, go. 2 minutes. Okay, if you'll pause for a moment, just sort of popcorn style, what are some of the downsides that came out for you of these assumptions? Offensive. What else? Oh, everybody asking the same thing. Yeah, and the person's like, what? You know, yeah. So duplication, what else? Judgment? Okay, so all kinds of things. It conveys a particular message or view that we have of the person when we approach things in this way. All right. And interestingly, not too long ago at a conference where consumers were present, as they say, nothing about us without us, right? So at a conference where consumers were present, this is a t-shirt that I saw. I'm not a case and I don't need to be managed. So that's why I had the question mark in the case management thing. So the questions that we have for us today, how do we describe our services? What do we say about them? If somebody says, hey, you know, what do you do with people? How would you describe your services? How would we describe our roles? What do we say about those we serve? What words do we use to describe those we serve? The words we have for people also convey a particular message, right? So thinking about words that are non-judgmental, thinking about ways to view people and see people and help people feel seen that don't contain judgment. And so the last question, though, I'd like you to talk with your partners for just a moment. How would those we serve describe us? What would they say about the services that we just provided? So here you go. Here's your scenario. You're leaving the office for the day, and the last person you just served is sitting outside waiting for a ride from a friend. They're talking to their friend on their phone, waiting for a ride from the friend. What are they saying about the session that they just had with you? 2 minutes, ready, go. What are they saying about you? How are they describing you and your services, their experience with you? How are they describing their experience with you to their friend? What are you overhearing right now? if you can pause your conversations for just a moment. And so now what are some words that are coming up, which are probably unlike those embedded case management assumptions that are often conveyed? What are people saying about you? What words are they using to describe your interaction with them? What words came up for you? Anyone? Say again? Compassionate. An advocate. So we're advocating for them, or they feel that we're doing a good job for them. What else? Patient. Encouraging, yes. Approachable. Resourceful. Yeah. So a whole different set of things, a whole different set of messaging is coming out here then. Okay. Something to think about. So you're going to offer a different idea than case management. Ideally, rather than case manager, maybe we can try on an idea about being a tour guide for change. So the kinds of words that you just described are things that a tour guide might have, right? There would be somebody that you'd be willing to get on a bus and go around town with. They would ask you how you see things. They would ask you what sites you'd like to see. That person would have some part in deciding what that journey was going to look like. It wouldn't all just be up to us to direct. So sometimes when we think about ourselves as a good tour guide, we want to be the sort of person that somebody that we're serving would actually get on a bus with us and want to go somewhere, that they would want to have that experience with us, that they know that we would be showing them helpful sites, and if we didn't know all of the helpful sites, we'd have a way of finding out, that we'd be resourceful, that we'd respect their perspectives, that we would respect their preferences, that the person would see us as being a helpful person and getting where they want to go, not just taking them where we think they should go. It's just something to think about, which comes from a shared understanding. Tour guides for change come from a shared understanding. They also come from a different set of assumptions, which are in marked contrast to the embedded assumptions of traditional case management. Here, while we have expertise that could be helpful, we always keep in mind that the person is the expert on themselves. And we've got two experts here now in the conversation, and together we can figure it out. I might have some great resources for you. You're the expert on you. Together we got this. Is the idea that we want to convey with partnership. We want to find out what information people need and want, and then deliver on that. We might match information and options that we have available and let the person decide for themselves what's going to work best for them. The thing that people choose for themselves is always going to be the thing that works for them. So you might have 3 options that work equally well for people, but the one that person chooses is the one that belongs to them. It's the one that they're going to actualize for themselves. So we have the faith that people can tell us what they need, and we're going to match our information to meet their strengths and their wants. We're going to offer advice and resources that further their needs and autonomy, that help them activate their goals as a whole person. So rather than just seeing the person through the lens of the problem or the challenge, we're seeing the whole person. And the whole person is brought to bear in the conversation, and then conveying that together we can figure it out. If you will, take 2 minutes now and identify 3 tangible benefits that would come from approaching conversations from these assumptions now. So 3 tangible benefits as a team that you can identify that would come from treating conversations like this. Ready, go, 2 minutes. Okay, if you'll pause again. And what, in terms of benefits to this style, what are the things that came up for you? What words are bubbling up? Buy-in. Trust. Support. Any others to shout out? Empowered. Yeah. Really different set of messages that we're conveying and different things that get to arise from that interaction just by approaching the same conversation differently. Something to bear in mind. So ways that we can continue being a good tour guide for change. We certainly don't want to make things worse. Do no harm is always a good principle. We want the person to feel that they're, what they tell us, at least within the bounds of confidentiality, it will be protected, which helps us, as you talked about, building trust with others and helping people feel empowered that they can really rely on our support. We definitely want to use evidence-based practices whenever possible, and do a good job of learning those and using those well. Certainly supporting and empowering, those are words that came up for you when you talked about the benefits. And importantly, exercising good self-care. If we're not able to be at our best in conversations and take the kinds of breaks that we need and rely on each other for support as a team, we can get pretty worn down pretty quickly and not be at our best and sometimes create difficulties where we don't need to. So just something to think about in terms of that. Being able to be compassionate with others often relies on, at least as a precondition, being compassionate with ourselves and our colleagues. Just something to bear in mind. To be kind to one another helps us also be kind to those we serve. What else in terms of guiding principles should we add to the list about being a good tour guide? Any other guiding principles that we should mention? These are just some suggestions. No judgment. No judgment. Acceptance. Motivation. Okay. Responsibility, sure. Something to think about and continue to adding to your list as teams. Earlier today, we talked just very briefly about foundational processes of being a good tour guide for change. And we talked about the foundation always being present with engaging. No matter where else we're working with people, provided engagement remains that solid foundation, it's always something that we can go back to. If anything gets ruptured, if the relationship in any way gets disrupted in any way, we can always go back to that foundation of engagement. So in engaging, the person is feeling heard and understood. These are sort of some mirrored questions. We may ask ourselves, have I done a good job showing the person I care about their perspective? The person on the other hand would say, I feel heard and understood. I felt like my perspective was important. This wasn't just about the agency's needs, but this was about me and what I needed. These are the kinds of things we hope people are saying. In the focusing process, we hope that we're hearing, my worker asked me about my preferences and my horizon lines and my goals for myself. It wasn't just about imposing a focus or an agenda on me. The agenda feels shared. In evoking, the person feels that we understand what's important to them, that we've asked them about their values, that we've asked them about their strengths, and that whatever plan we come up with incorporates their values and their strengths, that we're moving together in a way that feels actualizing of those things and feels empowering, that the person can use their competencies to move in a direction that they desire. And planning, last but not least, the most ideal change plans are the ones to which actually we contribute the least, because we've so successfully drawn the various elements from the person that they're able to collaborate with us to put it all such that it really belongs to them. It comes from them and belongs to them and hence is owned by them and carried out by them. So all of the different things where we can imagine that at each stage the person is saying, the plan really belonged to me. If the person who was serving me had some ideas, they asked permission to offer those ideas, and they asked me what I thought about their ideas. They just didn't assume that I should do it that way because they thought it was a good idea. But it's a real sharing and a partnership that we think about in terms of being a good tour guide to change. Because pretty much even if you got on a bus with somebody and they started telling you where you should go and why you should go there and how you were going to make, you'd get off that bus right away. And that's the last, and that means disengaging has happened. And we got to find a way. If the train has left the station, we've got to go back and make sure that we're both on it and headed in the same direction together. That's what this sort of framework allows us to do, to always come back to that engaging. This is an example of a shared agenda setting forum where we may suggest some topics that we think could be valuable as horizon lines for us. Some of these topics might be things that you're going to work with people about. I'm not sure. Here are some suggestions. You might introduce some sort of forum like this that has some bubbles to it and some ideas suggested, as well as some spaces that are remaining for the person to fill in some things that are important to them. You may say, here are some things that we might be working on together over the next couple of months in order for you to be successful here. Where would you like to start? And if there's something else that you'd like to add, you're welcome to add that as well. Either way, you're getting started on a shared agenda really quickly and helping the person make progress towards something. Everybody loves progress. It shows that we can work together. It keeps us engaged. So here are some thoughts about some things that you might work with people about. If you'll take just a moment, maybe 90 seconds or so, to take a look at this list and think about any other items, if you were using a bubble sheet like this to form a shared agenda with people you serve, what items would you pick from this, and what additional ones might you add or expect the person you're serving to add? Is this a good list of topics? Would you add something else to it in terms of your specific work? So take 2 minutes and think about what topics you'd like to make sure get introduced to the person. 2 minutes. Huh? Say again?
Those three bubbles at the bottom are behind the podium.
Oh, no. That's terrible. Well, let's see what we got. Is that a little bit better? We've got, can you see them at all? We have, there's some screens around. We have at the bottom, aging in place, increasing independence, and improving living conditions. I don't know if that helps at all, but there are some screens around that might also help. Which of these topics are salient for you? What other ideas would you add to this list? What do you expect people to come in needing and wanting from you? We're nearing the end of our time for this portion. If you'll pause your conversations, it's just a good thing to have at the ready, a list of possible topics. Sometimes folks don't always know what's going to be on their list of changes that they're looking forward to. So having a few things to normalize. Often I talk with people about X, Y, and Z. Where would you like to start? Is a great way of introducing a shared agenda that's both collaborative and autonomy supportive. And you know the situations you're in the most. Last but not least, a list of helpful tools for being a good tour guide for change. thinking about all of these, I just went through all the different implementations and consultations that I've done and came up with the top 10 strategies for incorporating over length of service when we have with people. We may have one session, we may have a half a dozen, we may be working with folks over several years. There are all kinds of activities that we can do together with them. And if you like, my contact information is within the materials, and I would be happy to talk with you about any of these specific ideas that would help you with your practice in serving others well. So I thank you for taking the time to work together today, and we want to welcome Tasha, and it looks like Trey is also going to be joining us. So thank you all, and here we go.
So we're inviting up, Ali is going to stay with us for a little bit more, and we're going to have some Q&A time around some case management questions. But I also wanted to introduce Tasha Dyson, who is a Family Self-Sufficiency Coordinator, but I thought it would be very helpful for her to come. She's out of Rockville Housing Authority, which is out of Rockville, Maryland, probably 45 minutes thereabout away. And she's really passionate about the work that she does with the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. And Rockville Housing Authority, I believe, is a small housing authority, and she has probably a huge caseload and a number of folks that she has to work with, and being able to manage that being one person, I think, is something that you guys may all identify with. And I think she'll really speak to whether you're a small PHA or working with a small PHA or working with a large PHA. When it comes to caseloads, 2 people can be more than enough to work with over time. I think Chicago Housing Authority, we were talking about that today. So I think she's really going to bring some insight. And so I want to invite up Tasha Dyson, and me and Ali are going to take our seats at the beautiful round table, semi-round table.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tasha Dyson, and I am the Family Self-Sufficiency Coordinator, and I'm also the Manager of Resident Services at my agency. As Trey said, I am one person, so hopefully I speak to the heart of a lot of you that have huge caseloads like myself. Being the FSS manager and Ross, Mr. Charles, don't yell at me. We do not dip and dab in both programs, but what I will say is that I am the one that the residents see in the community doing most of the groundwork. When I'm doing FSS and our Ross coordinator, we usually blend together when it comes to outreach and community activities and things of that nature. So that's how we kind of coordinate with that. And the residents see me in the community, and I don't know, I'm the heart of my agency, so a lot of people are drawn to me. And so therefore, it's easy if you're in the Ross program to eventually transition to the FSS program. So be active in the community. We at Rockville Housing and myself, we coordinate with a lot of partners in Montgomery County. So in Montgomery County, you have 2 housing authorities. The Housing Opportunities Commission, which is our larger housing authority, and then Rockville Housing Enterprises, which is the agency that I'm at. We are considered a small agency. So I had a thought when I was sitting down there, and I was thinking effective coaching or case management means when you're in the lobby as a Ross service coordinator, or if you're in the parking lot as a Ross service coordinator, you really, and you have the clients that's coming in and out of the office, you really want to be mindful and be conversive, I guess, if you will, to the clients. And when I was on a call with Trey about this, I was very passionate about, you have your HCV case managers and your public housing case managers, and 9 times out of 10, the residents do not want to deal with the housing specialist, if you will, right? They do not. And so, 9 times out of 10, I am called to the front office because they don't want to deal with the case managers because they run their agencies, or the agencies are businesses. Ross is a nonprofit, the nonprofit part, and so you're the heart of the agency. So they don't want to deal with them. And then, not to say them like they're bad people, because they're not, we do have businesses to run. However, if they missing documents for recertifications or interims or whatever it is, 10 times out of 10, the service coordinator is the person that's going to be there to help them get the paperwork, or we're going to advocate for them with the housing choice specialist or public housing specialist as to why they don't have the paperwork. And we're probably pleading and on bending knee to not terminate, but we are the backbone of the agency, hands down. I don't think that any agencies would be running or have the spotlight if it wasn't for Ross service coordinators or FSS coordinators for that matter. So community outreach events, being present in and around your PHA, having regular contact. Regular contact for the residents, for my participants, is usually quarterly. I am only one service coordinator, and I have probably a caseload of, right now, I'm stretching it, might be like 76, and that's just as an FSS coordinator. And so we get creative. I have a Facebook page. I'm running that on the backside of my Facebook page, and I'm running an Instagram page, and you're doing all the outreach because you want your partners to know that you're there and you're functioning, and we need help. And usually they are like the county, I don't know, there's different agencies here, but the county, if we're a small county, so our county executives and other local nonprofits, they are on our Facebook page. We're always posting pictures and things of that nature, and they are always wanting to work with us. Referrals and resources. I can say a lot about referrals and resources because 9 times out of 10, Ross is easy. Not easy, but Ross is easy because you're doing services and trying to help the families become self-sufficient through means of resources and referrals. 9 times out of 10, somebody's walking through the door because they want resources and referrals, and they may not want to join your program. That's just what it is, and you can't force them to join your program, you know. So, you know, you really got to have a heart in it because you're going to write the referral or the resource, or do you deny somebody services because they won't sign up for your program. Usually, I'm servicing people that are just in the lobby or they're new to the area. Client-centered approach, listening to your clients. Again, service coordinators, you're going to be the one that's going to be listening to everything that the residents or participants are going through. The program specialists do not want to hear it at all. They could care less. Again, not to make it sound bad, but they could care less why you could not get your bank statement, and sometimes we have to maybe drive them to the library so they can use a computer to print it out, maybe talk to social services to get more information. So we're the ones that is getting that information because maybe the resident cannot provide that information. And having a sense of understanding and empathy, you got to have a huge heart. In one of my email, the signature at the bottom of my email is services the rent that we pay in life. And in this field, that statement is true. So every day we get to go out and make a difference in people's lives, and the reward is the work that we do and the happiness and joys that we get to bring to other people. Am I done? So the public housing case manager works directly with the raw service coordinator. For us, we're a very small agency. For our public housing folks, when they're having an issue with the public housing case manager, 10 times out of 10, I can hear them from my desk making a ruckus at the front office, and then I get up, and then I go out there to see what's going on. When I get there, it just kind of brings peace, I guess, and then, you know, I take them to my office and I resolve it, and then I am helping with the recertification or the interim. Whatever the issue was at the beginning is no longer. So that's what I meant about working intimately with the case managers through the recertifications and the interims and admissions process, troubleshooting the process, and we're the biggest advocate, literally. You're your client's biggest advocate. I'm done. Okay. Ross service coordinators bring important information and attention to housing case managers. I'm often told that I'm the heart of the agency, Tasha, and we are the business. So I say that because, you know, a client can have a death in a family, and I know that's very hard for a client to go through, but it has nothing to do with the recertification process or why you couldn't come in for your appointment. And so we're the ones that is communicating that to the case managers. And we are the ones that ensure the participant and the family needs are being met. And I just included some pictures because, again, our 4 service coordinators, we are the ones that are in the community doing the groundwork for our agencies to shine. Thank you.
So we're going to take some questions. So if you do have questions around case management, you can make your way to the mic, but I'm going to start off with a few. So I felt Tasha getting passionate towards the end, and I think she made a really important point to say that many of you guys may be considered the heart of your agencies, and if you're serving those that, if you're a nonprofit organization or you're not necessarily a staff of the PHA, you may also see that residents may tend to go to you before they may go to PHA staff. And that's because of just the nature of probably the business and that recertification process that she was talking about. So I thought that was really interesting there. So one of the questions that I have is, then how do you strengthen your relationship with, it may not be necessarily a case manager or that housing specialist, but anyone that's one that is trying to meet a goal or a metric, and there's classified as a case manager, but you really feel that they're trying to meet just a number. How do you then strengthen that relationship as a coordinator to then provide that case management for the resident?
So I do not struggle a lot because I am working for my families to help them in the program, help them to be strong and become self-sufficient. And so therefore, there could be a squabble sometimes because, again, I am the biggest advocate. And so therefore, if I explain the reasoning, behind whatever it is that I'm trying to convey, and if you don't get it, you don't get it. And I don't mean to say it like that, but I say it because, we have a job to help these families. You don't burden them more, so we're lifting the burden. And so I'm conveying that to the specialists, and if they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. I do my best at trying to get whatever it is that they need.
That's good. Like I said, if you do have questions, you can email the email address if you are live streaming, and you can make your way to the mic. I do have a question for Allie. I actually have 2 more questions that I feel like that is out there that someone may be afraid to ask. But one for Allie, what would you describe is the difference between a case management approach, and I've heard you use the term coaching, you and Tasha, what would you describe, or how would you differentiate the two, if there is a difference?
Yeah, there is a difference.
Okay.
Allie had a good example about not needing, I don't need you to case manage. I'm big on coaching because I do believe that everybody, they need a little bit of guidance, and a lot of people are just seeking it, you know. And so as coordinators, we're in a field where, you know, we're there to guide. Case management just seems just a little bit too strenuous for me. Like, it's just a little too hardcore. It sounds too much social servicey like, and coaching kind of cushions it for the clients. You know, it feels better when they walk in the office and they're there to see their coach, not their case manager. The reputation for case management when it comes to social services agencies it doesn't have a good rep. And so I've never liked to label myself as a case manager, and eventually transitioned into coaching.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so understanding that labels are important, and it may very well say case manager on a person's card, or that may be one's job title. But those questions that go back to how does one see oneself's role, you know, what is our role? How do we see ourselves? How do we describe those we serve? Are they a case to be managed? Right. Or are they a person? Someone may be in human resources, but what do we deal with in human resources? We deal with people, right? So realizing that people are more than a collection of their problems, there are many things to self-exploration: goals, skills, roles, responsibilities, values that are far more central to the person's intrinsic motivation than the problem for which we seek to solve. Just something to think about. We may say to somebody as we convey or clarify our role with them, I know it says case manager on my card, and what I really am, I hope, is going to be a good partner for you to secure some of the things that are really valuable to you. You can describe your role in any way you like. And that may be as a coach, that may be as a tour guide for change. I had somebody the other day talk to a case manager, sure enough, but how did he think of himself and his role with people? He thought of himself as a professional foot washer, because he was really truly serving and honoring and looking up to those that he was serving. You can think of yourself in any way you like. It has to be personal, and what you want is to ideally walk out every day hearing people say the kinds of things and viewing your relationship the way that's going to be most positive.
It's me again. My question is, I don't know if it's for you, Trey, in particular, but I know that there's certain things that we can and cannot do according to the Ross grant, and direct service is one of those things. So would helping out with the recertification be considered a direct service that we cannot provide? So I just wanted to get clarification, because I want to serve our residents as best as we can. So if they come to me and they say something, well, I can't do that because that's direct service.
That's a great question. So one of the things that we mentioned in the NOFA is that a Ross coordinator can do case management. And I think we're intentional in saying that, because you can't serve residents without some form of case management that has to be there, which is a direct service, right? But we also understand that with many of you guys, and probably with the caseload, I want to say there was, just did some site visits in California, and I thought what was very helpful is that we had the Ross coordinator who did 60 to 80% of the case management, which he's here in the room. Again, his name is Ben Delgado. And he told me that, but I thought what was also interesting is that he had other staff that was leveraged through partnerships, which we'll talk about partnership next, that was also able to do either financial coaching or case management around very specific things that he may not be able to touch or give time to. And so I think when you're thinking about how to refer out, I think that's the point where you lead them to where may be best for them to grab those that expert in that particular area. And then I think the other piece to add is we don't want to see, HUD doesn't want to see that PHAs are using Ross staff to do recertifications. We understand that there is a benefit to Ross coordinators being a part of that process, but we don't want to see the resident services be lost in that kind of work that then PHA staff have to do, and there's no defining line with that.
Well, just to clarify, I was generally speaking about my elderly and disabled folks that can't, get out the house, and need help with the recertification process, or you might even have to get in touch with their case managers at DHS or something like that. So you do, have to go, or we have blind residents or, disabled residents. So sometimes you do have to help or get in touch with the next relative to help them with the recert.
So I do have another question. How do you track, or what case management softwares do you use, if you use any at all? How do you even manage that? Because no one has that question in here.
I cut my eye at you. You get creative, right? I recently started a membership at Compass. You guys familiar with them? And they have been a big help to me recently. Prior to us getting new software, this software is just, nobody comes to show you how to work the software.
No one?
Excel is your best friend.
Okay.
And you get creative. For me, I was grandfathered into my position, and so training was just, I've learned along the way. Now I'm 10 years in, and so you develop a system, and Excel is your best friend. Yes.
So Excel is your best friend. HUD may say, also find a way to invest in. She used Compass, but I think also one of the things is, as an FSS coordinator, they don't have the benefit of admin funds as you guys do. And so really think about that. You can use your admin funds to support some case management softwares that may be out there. And many of you guys may use, by no way am I endorsing, but just saying efforts to outcomes. There is tracking at a glance. There is Ask Online. There is Family Metrics. There is another one that I heard, Efforts Express. She talks about Compass. So there's a few case management softwares that may be helpful as you guys are looking to track, because I don't know if anyone like you, and when we go to visit folks, Excel may be great for some, but may not be great for all. And that's because of maybe the amount of folks, or I don't know how to copy one cell into another. Like sometimes Excel just gets a little bit tricky. So you really want to find that software that works not only for your program, but also that your coordinators are, they have that training as well. So Allie, and maybe this is something that HUD can hear, so I'm really, and Tasha, you guys can answer. What do you guys think is a sizable caseload, something that you can handle? Because HUD is saying all of these units need to be served. So what do you think is a reasonable caseload based on how much work you may have to put into working with a family?
We're a small agency, so for years we had one service coordinator, and I've always maintained 50 units, and I'm always told not to go above that, but sometimes I would stretch, myself. So 50 is a safe number. I can handle 50. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and it's not, maybe it's not so much the number of units or the number of cases that I'm thinking about, but really more of our time allocation about that, right? Because there's that sort of bell curve of the certain number in any situation are going to be really easy to work with. And we just think about human beings generally. 10% are ready to go with whatever you've got happening, and they're the eager ones. They're also sometimes the ones that are easy not to spend time with, but a little bit of validation and support and encouragement of those folks and acknowledgement of what they've been able to do is a real payoff. Then there's the 10% that take 90% of your energy, right? and those are the ones maybe who are more in a struggling position that with working efficiently and effectively, helping increase their sense of confidence to do something, helping them identify the values that are important to them, they're really going to be able to light a fire inside and go on with just a little bit of help from you. Interestingly enough, one of the strategies around motivational interviewing is working more effectively with strugglers, which brings them into the realm of success instead of letting those fall off. And then the ones in the middle take about 10% of your energy. But it's the 10% that take 90% of your energy that in order to work more efficiently and effectively, the more difficult or challenging the person or the family, the more they need you. And the contradiction is, of course, is that those who are struggling and challenging are often the ones we're not as eager to help. So anytime you see someone, you're like, oh, that's the one who needs you the most. And there's your cue to flip the switch on all the effective am I consistent skills. They need you the most. The people who are ready to change, you just encourage them and they're great. It's the ones who need you the most that are the hardest to work with, and those are the ones you can turn around.
I was also going to add that being mindful that you're also working with families, so you're just not working with an individual. A lot of my time is just connecting youth to services so that the parent can go to a program. Almost all of my time is connecting some type of youth activity so that the parent can go to a job training program or just to go to work or go to school. So putting those services in place for the family and just getting the kids in a child care or after school activity or something to that effect, at low or no charge. And it takes a lot of work to do that just so mom or dad can go on about their business. So that takes a lot. And you're not talking 50 units. At this point, you're talking 125 people sometimes wrapped around, your ankle. Sometimes you feel like an octopus.
Yeah, there you go.
Truth.
And what Tasha is describing reminds me, if you've ever been into a gym or some sort of weightlifting room kind of a thing, and you see someone struggling underneath a very heavy weight, they don't need you to lift the weight. They just need you to give them 5 pounds of support. If you step behind them and just lift it just a wee bit, they can actually lift that thing. So providing those really crucial, pivotal things can help the person lift their own weight.
That was really good. So I feel like I'm going to call Allie and Tasha tomorrow. So I can
look at all the expertise here. This is amazing.
Or all of you guys, so I can be coached
Guys are
tomorrow in
awesome.
my own life, right? I think this was really helpful. One, because it's good to be, and I think one thing that I think the Ross team wanted is to have the balance of not only reporting requirements and all of those things, but really to provoke thought and to really hear and feel the energy and the passion in the room. And so I really thank you guys for coming and I think giving us a really good thought process on case management, and I may change now the language if I can, to really consider what we say about coaching, but also what that approach should be as we look at Ross. And I think it's also helpful for you guys to know that we understand the amount of sometimes probably pressure that you guys feel to see that just one family or one person has one win, and that one win may not be employment. That one win may just be that they walked into your office.
Yep.
And the sad part is that we don't have sometimes the ability, or you may not feel the win when HUD asks for reporting, and you say, well, they just got into my office, because we want to see that they gained employment. But I do want you to also recognize my heart, too, as the Ross program manager, and also many in the room that are HUD staff, that we do acknowledge the amount of effort that it takes to just remove one barrier for one resident. So just imagine many. So with that, I'm going to, time is up, so we're being really good on time. I'm going to invite two more folks to the table. Allie is actually about to step away and I believe get on a flight.
Yep.
But if you want to share your contact information.
Sure, and will the materials be made available?
Yes.
Yeah, and please do feel free to check in if you have questions or you have comments or you want to share your successes. You can write to this email at this Gmail address for me, and I'd be happy to hear of your great successes or know any way that I can be supportive to you. Thank you for the great work that you do. Best wishes to everyone. Thanks for welcoming me today. Thank you, Tasha.
So Charles and Pamela will join us here at the table. And as they're coming, we're going to have a break after this session. But we're going to talk about partnership development, which is really important. And if you don't mind clicking for me. Or do you mind getting the clicker for me, Charles? The clicker? Yep.
Y'all know this now, so right.
So we have Pamela Lawrence, who is a part of our Choice Neighborhood team here at HUD. So in our office, we probably didn't talk about this. We have a few self-sufficiency programs in our office, that being Jobs Plus. There's the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, and then we have Ross, as you guys know. But we also have Choice Neighborhood. If you're a moving to work agency, that is also in our office. What else do we have? Mixed finance and all of the brick and mortar stuff. Capital Fund. I don't know my team. But there's quite a few of us. But we have a great privilege of working together and really having, trying to not only build the capacity of grantees, but also hopefully building the capacity of our residents in our role as the federal government. So I'm going to talk about effective case management, partnership development. So the objective here is going to be to identify the various categories in the continuum of partnerships and collaboration, to define collective impact, which may be a new term, or if you guys know it, you'll probably, say amen with me. Gain exposure to successful collective impact approaches, and identify ways to leverage resources through partnerships. So I have a story. Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
So one day I was doing a site visit at Utopia Housing Authority. And by the way, Utopia Housing Authority does not exist, but this story is a real story, okay? And we were having a partnership development meeting, and hopefully this housing authority is not listening on the live stream, but they'll know exactly who they are. We were having a meeting about partnership development, and what the goal was to discuss some strategies that we have that HUD set forth, but really the grantees set forth, and then how those partners were then contributing to that goal, right? Sounds like a very easy strategy meeting. So we started going around and everyone started talking, and the question was how you're contributing to the goal, what are your challenges, some limitations, promising practices, best practices. And everyone started going around the room and they said, my name is so-and-so, I work for so-and-so agency, and we serve youth from 8 to 10, and we're just so passionate about the work that is here. And so the next person said, I am from so-and-so agency, and I work with youth from 8 to 10, and we also are so passionate. Then the other one said, we work with males of color, and we really want to address some of the disparities within males of color. And the other said, well, we work with the Latin population because we understand that English may not be the first language. And then after maybe 30 minutes of this, I said, whoa. This is a partnership development meeting, and we're going around and sharing information about what and who does what. You can't possibly be partners. And so how many of you guys go around the room in your partnership meetings and talk about who and what other agencies do. And not that there's not a role for that, but really understanding when we're talking about building partnerships, we're going beyond just information sharing, but really getting to the place where we can collaborate. So networking. So this is what I was just talking about. So by the way, as a plug, there's a networking session at 5 p.m. today, so don't go anywhere. But networking, exchanging information for mutual benefit. And so that's what was happening in that meeting. Everyone was sharing who they serve and how they're going about serving. And so that's really about networking. Nothing is wrong with it, but you have to understand when you're really trying to go for a goal and everyone has a shared outcome with that goal, networking is just one portion of that equation. Then next is coordinating, exchanging information and altering activities for mutual benefit to achieve common purpose. So at that point, you're now changing your activities. What that can look like is I have a Spanish 1 and 2 class. You have a Spanish 2 and 3 class. I'm just going to let my folks know that you have a Spanish 1 and 2 class. So we're altering some activities and just doing some light information sharing. But it also could mean I'm referring out now those residents to your agency who may do what I don't do. Then you have cooperating, exchanging information, altering activities, and sharing resources. So now at this point, we have something shared that we're working towards. Now we're cooperating with each other. We have now not only our residents knowing that we work together, but we actually feel that we work together, all right? And you're sharing your resources. So I'm able to leave flyers at your place, and you're able to leave flyers at mine. That's like low-level sharing, I would call that. But really, at that point, how can we really make sure there's a pipeline for residents when they're when we're working with them? Because I'm meant to say this when we're talking about case management too, that sometimes our residents have 100 people that are contacting them because of whatever circumstance they may be in. I give a great example. I was a big brother in Boston, and my little mentee, he got into trouble when he was in school, and he had 5 case managers that contacted him on top of me being his mentee. He was exhausted, and he was only 9 years old. Oh my gosh. Okay? And no one really networked. Well, we did network. We knew that he has 6 case managers. We didn't really coordinate. Well, we kind of did coordinate because I was like, I'll come between 5 and 10, and you'll come between 2 and 4. And so there was never a gap. But then we didn't really cooperate because we didn't share those resources. So how many of our residents have so many people that they're touching and there's no cooperation? And then there's collaboration, and that's exchanging information, altering activities, sharing resources, and enhancing the capacity of another for mutual benefit. So at that point, we're really working together to make sure not only that that pipeline is there, but that we're also building our capacity. I hate to put, I just went on the site visit, but one of the interesting things that I saw a part of the site visit was that we had the Ross coordinator who also worked very closely with a site director for the housing authority. And why I found that to be interesting, because where resources were lacking for one agency, they were able to supply it in another agency. And so they were building each other's capacity to be able to manage and work through some issues or some challenges and limitations. And really, this is where collective impact happens, when you're at the collaboration level. So what is collective impact? There's 5 conditions of it, but collective impact brings people together in an organized way to solve complex social issues. And the 5 elements is a common agenda, shared measurement, which we're going to talk about. Pamela's going to go into that. Reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and a backbone quarterback to guide or support. And why partnerships and collaboration are important for Ross. Ross funding only, it pays for service coordination, so it doesn't pay for direct services. So you're not using funding to pay for, the GED course. You're not using funding to pay for a resume writing course. So you're coordinating that, and that goes to show the importance of your partners or those that are providing those services. It allows for residents to access other resources, programs, services, networks, and staff offered by partners. So as Tasha was stating, there's some times where, or many may agree, that for certain situations or issues, residents may not want to always talk to PHA staff. And so it may be helpful to have a partner there that could really facilitate or help them through one of whatever they may need at that time. Increases your organization's resources and capacity, which we talked about, and your program is as good as your partners. And I want to kind of say that again, that your Ross program is really going to be as good as your partners. One of the things that we track you here at HUT, what we try to track is outcomes. But how many of you really think you're directly associated with that outcome? For example, if a resident gains employment, you didn't necessarily hire them. Maybe you did through some admin funds, but you didn't necessarily make that outcome happen. It's really through your coordination and working with your partners to really get that resident to achieve that outcome. And so you're really, your program is going to be as good as your partners. So I'm going to turn it over to Pamela, who's going to talk about promising practices with collective impact and specifically with choice neighborhood grants.
Okay, how am I clicking on this thing? That moves it
Right.
forward? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. See, he just set me up, gave me this theme, didn't give me any instructions. Good afternoon. I am a social worker. I knew I was going to get some love from this room. But I also used to work for a housing authority in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I had Ross coordinators that worked for me. And I know the work that you do is very important, so thank you very much for being on the front line to help our residents get connected to very important resources. Now, my job is to bring this collective impact process to life by talking about some of our choice grantees. And for those of you who don't know the Choice Neighborhoods program, it's a revitalization program that demolishes dilapidated, blighted housing that's no longer financially sustainable for the housing authority as well as a multifamily owner, and then builds new housing back by replacing every subsidized unit or giving vouchers to make sure everyone has a solid opportunity to retain their subsidy, but also invest in neighborhood resources, but more importantly, to serve the residents who live in that site that is targeted for the revitalization by providing economic development, employment, education, health, mental health, recreational, age-in-place, you name it, we do it. I don't, the grantees do. I used to do it. I act like I do it, but they do all the hard work. We just try to make sure they have adequate funding. And they also leverage $8, average $6 to $8 for every one of the dollars that we give our grantees. We give $30 million grants, they leverage another $6 to $8 because it takes all of that in order to orchestrate the resources and meet the needs of our residents. So I did kind of a quick inventory of some of our grantees to see how they're using collective impact to bring about the revitalization of their communities, their housing, their neighborhood, and the lives of the people that live there, but also how they're using it with our planning grants, who get about $350,000 to bring a diverse group of folk together to develop a transformation plan around housing, neighborhood, and people. And what I found is most of our grants, I won't say all, have created a shared vision, a common purpose through the convening of very diverse groups. They've also built long-term commitment because they know that the revitalization efforts cannot get done in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It takes them on average 7 or more years to fully revitalize the communities that they're working within, because you're talking housing and neighborhood amenities, economic development, resources, as well as trying to improve schools and reduce public safety. So those are not quick fixes. And it also requires a solid partnership identity. Who are we? Why are we all coming together? What are we all about as a group? And then thirdly, they've got to have fourthly, a purposeful connection. We're coming together around this shared agenda for this shared amount of time in order to accomplish these particular goals. And so for the planning grant is to develop a transformation plan. For the implementation grant is to build a housing, enhance the neighborhood, and hopefully, and most importantly, change the lives of the people that live in the community. And then engagement of targeted residents was one of the other collective impact characteristics that I saw happening in every one of our grant communities. And that's not just invite a few residents to meeting to tell them what's going on, but engaging residents to help with the planning, to help with the plan for the implementation and the actual implementation by hiring, training, and also contracting with residents. And then lastly, to have a set of shared measurements. Did we achieve our goal? Did we purposefully come together and accomplish what we set out to achieve? So those all pretty much mirror what Trey was telling you about his components for a collective impact. But these are what I pulled from our choice grantees. Now I want to speak to about 3 examples, and I meant to set my timer, so you gotta help me now, you know I will talk. I identified 3 examples that I wanted to specifically pull from. Anybody from Columbus, Ohio in the house? Well, the Housing Authority established a group called PAC, which is Partners Achieving Community Transformation. They branded themselves. They identified themselves for around the purpose that they hope to achieve, and that is transforming a neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. Winston-Salem was a planning grant. They worked to engage residents, and they actually established a resident organization that created a 501c3 so they would have the long-term sustainable commitment around the shared agenda that they had identified. And then Lamar is in Pittsburgh, and they were challenging the grantee to do better, to engage residents, but more importantly, to build their capacity so they can have a meaningful influence on the transformation plan that's currently underway. All right, now I'm going to break down some of the items that I just spoke about. Shared vision, and do they have all these? You all have copies of all these? You don't?
We're gonna send them out.
You'll get those eventually. So these are really information heavy, and believe it or not, I cut my presentation in half. So, so I wanted to make sure that I left you with information that you could take home and digest a little bit further. But on the shared vision, the common purpose, bringing providers to the table and say, we just need your help, is not a shared vision. It has to be something that's defined and specific and measurable and achievable. And so you have to align yourself with those providers that are serving a mutual population, whether it's age, race, gender, whether it's need, whether it's geographic location. There's got to be some kind of shared opportunity to come together. And so you can't always pull people from one side of town and ask them to serve 20 miles away from them, because it's not logistically good for them, nor is it logistically good for residents to get to. So you need to look for the geographic specific kinds of partners that can meaningfully engage with you for the long term. Mindful and regular communication. What does that mean? That means don't just send out a notice 2 days before the meeting saying it's time to get together, you all, so we can talk about the needs of our residents. But when you come together, say, here's what we would like to achieve, and let's break that down into meaningful buckets so that each meeting we are mindfully achieving something, whether it's talking about our communication, outreach, measure, shared data, shared information, shared tracking systems. And so you have to have very concrete agendas when you bring folk together so that they can come away with something that's benefiting them as well as benefiting you. And prioritization of those agendas. Not everything is important to everyone, and so you've got to gain from those that you convene what is most important. Don't just assume that it's because it's important to you, that it's going to be important to your 10 or 20 other providers that have come together. So when I say, how do you share and develop a shared agenda? Does anybody already work in collective impact and has had the opportunity to create a shared agenda, shared vision? Yes? How did you go about it? Can you, 2 seconds of how you got folk on the same page? Stand up so they can hear you. And talk loud like you country. Come on. Yeah, I was hoping. Thank you so much.
We all came together and we went out to the site that we were planning on demolishing, which we did, and worked toward and tried to get everybody together. And we had regular meetings, and we also kept agendas. We gave our notes every time we met, and we sent to everyone so we would know where we were standing. We also had phone calls. We, kept together and was together. Yeah.
So thank you very much for being brave enough to stand up. And I know some of you others are doing this already. You may not call it collective impact, but you are coming to consensus on what you hope to achieve as a group. And it's really important that that get done in writing. So, who should be around the table? I think that's also important. Who are stakeholders? And I say anybody and everybody who lives in the neighborhood, works in the neighborhood, is serving the residents mutually, live by the residents, who are impacted by residents, and your programming can take advantage of it as well. And then who should be a part of the partnership? Anybody and everybody who cares about the agenda. I mean, you should not be exclusive because you never know what gold might be below that surface. And so you've got to invite everyone to the table in hopes that they might bring something of value to the process. Building for long-term building for long-term momentum and growth. When a group comes together, there's kind of the group growth thing. You have talked about the formation of a group, that sometimes people do what Trey was talking earlier, just give 101, this is what I do, here's my flyer, and then everyone leaves. That's valuable. But now you've got to get everyone to the table to talk about how those resources can connect to one another, how you can enhance what the other is doing, how you can fill the gaps that exist within your community, how you can do it better because what's being provided to date is not sufficient. Otherwise, you wouldn't be coming around the table to talk about how do we improve service delivery to a group of people. And so sometimes you got to talk about securing funding. Sometimes you got to talk about politics and policies and processes so that you can make sure that the longevity of your partners will be in place for the long-term commitment that they're making to this committed vision that you all have all come to consensus on. You need to define roles. Am I ahead of myself? Hold on, y'all. You should not give me one of these things. You need to define roles. I want to go to the next one. You need to be talking about roles and responsibility for each person that comes into the membership. Have you ever been to a partnership meeting and only 3 people talk and there's like 30 people in the room? Mm-hmm. That's because roles haven't been defined, because responsibility hasn't been assigned, because the leadership hasn't been thoughtful about how to engage and value those that come to the table. So often you have to be very concrete about how you're going to maximize the partners that come around the table. Someone has to be giving thought to it. Branding the organization, being deliberate in forming small teams is important because not everyone likes to speak in large groups. The 3 of us are extroverts. Some people might be an introvert and they can do better in smaller groups. They can get a lot produced quietly, but not in public. And so you have to give them an opportunity to perform and also serve that shared agenda. And then you have to also find ways to work across your partnership. Sometimes it's not the entire group working together, singing the same song. It might be 3 or 4 working in small subgroups so that they can better achieve some of the smaller tasks like the data mining, smaller tasks like getting the city to engage, smaller tasks by identifying foundation funders who can come to the table and listen to the challenges and barriers that might be presented during these conversations so that you can educate them for future funding. And so giving folks those kinds of assignments can then make the partnership more meaningful because you're all contributing. Now, you have to structure yourself as well. It can't be just everyone come and, talk and here's a few tasks. You got to have an organizational chart so that you know how to maximize those that are sitting around the table. The Ohio model is called PAC, and they had their investment partners structured so that the money people, the University of Ohio gave $1 million to this PAC because they were committed. And don't think they came to the table just out of the goodness of their heart. They needed land. They needed to grow. They also need other students to come to their school and sustain. They need the community support their growth in that neighborhood. And so it's a win-win opportunity. So that $1 million served them as well as it served this organization coming together. The city gave money, Choice gave money, the Housing Authority gave money. So these large-scale collective impact processes, there's a cost to them because you have to have staff. When you start bringing 50 folk around the table, you have to have someone who's taking notes. You have to have someone who's creating a newsletter. You have to have someone that's tracking and looking at how you're making a difference through each and every meeting. So it's not just a volunteer that you rope into taking a few notes for you, but they have to be staffed often so that you can have meaningful data to share and then to also later evaluate. They had advisory committees. They had committees for jobs, for safety, for health, wellness, education, and housing. All of the work groups had other engaged stakeholders that also met and influenced and then also helped to implement their transformation plan. Purposeful connections. I've already said a little bit about the importance of inviting funders and policymakers as well as decision makers to the table, because it's not just enough to talk about how do we work and connect the dots and align our resources. Sometimes the resources need to be reordered, need to be reshuffled, reprioritized, and funded differently in order to really achieve the goals that you all have set forth in your shared vision. And so you want to have purposeful connections. You want to have meaningful conversations. You want to have an agenda for every single meeting so that you can make sure that when you are talking about how do we make this happen better, that the integration can actually happen. Because if you have policy, which we ran into often in our organizations, that some of our residents just weren't eligible for some of our partner resources. Either they live 1 block away from their geographic target area, or they were $1 over income, or they weren't the right gender, because some of our programs were gender specific. And so you have to really look at how you can integrate and overcome those challenges through these meaningful, purposeful connections. You have to define those roles, you have to host those meetings, and I suggest that you share in the hosting of meetings. That way, every one of the partners will have an opportunity to facilitate and lead and also raise their special issues and needs and concerns that they would like to put on the table. Be data-driven and also keep notes, because people forget. Your membership changes from month to month. It's not always going to be the same people sitting around the table. The executive director might come initially when the mayor is at the meeting, and then when the mayor stops coming, all of a sudden, they're sitting to somebody else. Who's this person? They're not always the decision maker, right? So you have to keep notes so that you can make sure that that information gets back to those decision makers so that they can then support the recommendations and the coordination and the strategies that have been developed. Now, in the case of PAC, I like them a lot. If you haven't noticed, I'm using their example a lot. In the case of PAC, they're very organized with a timeline. And so it's not just good enough to have meetings and have a shared agenda, but you have to have a method, a methodology of how you're going to go from point A to point B to point C to completion. And they actually said, we're going to look at our conditions and inform ourselves as a group. Not all of us understand the needs and the concerns and the barriers and the challenges. Some of us know some of us know it all. We want to make sure that the group as a whole has the same understanding. We also want to gather other perspectives, because my perspective may not be your perspective, and we want to make sure that we're inclusive in all visions and ideas about how a problem can be solved. And then we want to also be inclusive for all ideas and solutions, and that's what this chart is showing, how they gathered all that information, created a strategy, and then moved into who's going to make it happen, who's going to commit to stages 1, 2, and 3, strategies 4, 5, 6, who's going to bring the resources, who's going to make sure that the implementation occurs, and then what kind of metrics are going to help us measure it. I keep looking up there, but I got this stuff right here in front of me. It's hard not to look at a TV, isn't it? An engagement of target population. Now, I don't know how many of you have residents that sit around your Ross partnership meeting. Anybody have residents that come? Good, good for you. Not enough of you do. Not enough of you do. If you really want to know what the real needs are, you need to hear from the residents. If you really want to know what strategies and solutions are going to work, you need to hear from the residents. Now, I used to develop programs and write grants, and I thought I was getting down. And then I opened my doors and nobody came. Because I didn't talk to the residents. I didn't say, is this a good time? Would you work with this particular vendor? They had issues with some of the vendors. And so you have to make sure that you gather their insight so that it can influence an outcome that's going to make sense for them. And now I say that it's not just good enough to bring them to the table. In the cases of the Larimer group from Pittsburgh, they were fighting the organization to make sure their voices were heard, because they were kind of on the outside looking in at all this great planning that was going on. And so as a result, they trained them in organizational development, community planning, race relations, problem solving, data, budget, grant writing, and now they formed a 501c3, and they are developing programs to serve their mutual neighbors. And now they're at the table as a provider. And this is happening in many of our choice neighborhoods. In Philadelphia, they're running an after-school program. In Winston-Salem, I think I might have them up there as well, they too are doing more training of other resident groups. Now, I think I'm out of time, aren't I? So you can't just pull people to the table. And I know, wait, I gotta say this last thing. I gotta finish my last slide. You have to be able to measure success, because you want, when I said you have to form it for long-term continuity and make sure that you can achieve the goal, you have to have ways to tell folks throughout the convening, the gathering of key stakeholders, that we are achieving, we are accomplishing, we are on time, we are on schedule, because they won't keep coming if they don't see something productive happening from the group. And I'll stop there and pass it on to my colleague. Thank you, thank you. That was hard, y'all. I had 25 pages and I had to cut it down. So.
I'll make it up for you.
Thank you.
As you all have heard in our communications this morning and a lot of things that we shared, and you also shared, there is not enough money in order to do everything we need to do in order to serve our residents, whether it's RAWS, FSS, whatever the program it is. So leveraging resources and having the right partners, I'm going to put right there next time, having the right partners at the table is so important. I used to, in my other life, I ran a nonprofit organization. A lot of my partners just showed up because they heard I served good refreshments. They wasn't offering nothing. And it took me a few refreshment dollars to figure that out. So it's so important that you really put some time in making sure that you have the right partners and really, really spend some time knowing the importance of how to leverage those resources. And I think it's so important in the first bullet, like I was saying, is to analyze your program needs and document your accomplishments each year. And I'm not talking about what you're going to put in Standard for Success and all of these other Compass and LEPAs and all that other stuff. I'm talking about where you can really communicate to a community person, a company, a business, a grocery store in your community, what your program needs are. Because there may be something very outside of what the NOFA and RAW say that you need to be doing. You need to know what your program needs are. And then really make sure that you're able to document those and be able to communicate those very, very clearly to your partners. Also, convene regularly with your community partners. How many of you kind of meet once a year, quarterly, semi-annually? Are you meeting regularly with your partners?
Monthly?
Monthly? How many are my monthly folks? Okay, not good. Okay, okay. And so it's so important that you meet with them to communicate not only what you're doing and what's going on at the agency, but also what they're providing for your residents and for your families. Very important to know what your partners are doing. And I think it's very important also to conduct a written evaluation of your partners. How many of you, at the end of your year, sit down with all of your partners and have a meeting where you kind of evaluate what the year looks like with them? Ain't enough of you. So we got about 150 people in the room. So I saw about a show of hands, unless the rest of you sleep, that 3 of you all do that. And I think the reason that is so important, because it makes them accountable to what they're providing to you. They come in, you sit down, they sign, write all this real nice stuff up and sign it, you sign it, they sign it, you date it. And then are you really getting that each year from your partners? It's very, very important that you know what your partners are providing. And sometimes you have to tell folks bye. If you're not doing anything and we're not, the relationship is not producing, something that's beneficial for our agency and for our families, maybe we need some different partners. So just keep in mind, I have gone out several times, as some folks know. I do site visits. Won't talk about you all, but I have done site visits. And I'd be flipped. I said, let me see your matching stuff and let me see your community partners. And I see these folks and see these folks and go back out there, and it's the same folk year after year after year. I thought, well, do the needs ever change where you may need different folks at the table? Or these folks haven't done anything, why are they still here? So it's important that you have some type of written communication. You don't have to be evaluating the folks every year, but something to really have some idea of what that partnership value is to your organization, and more importantly, what that value is to your families. Okay, document, and I'm gonna spend some time later with the person that talked about how to quantify and maybe really, really, really document the value of that partnership. Because I think, what if you lose that partnership? Say, for instance, if the Boys and Girls is providing you services, and I see a lot of what the Y is doing and various people are doing, then if you lose that, can you go to another community partner, or can you go to a bank or to a nonprofit organization and say, because we lost this valuable resource with the Boys and Girls Club that was providing these membership and this summer program for our children or from whoever, and it costs $12,500. That's impressive that you can go to somebody and really put a monetary value on that partnership and what that resource was for your organization. Very key. So I would really encourage you all to really work on trying to put a monetary value to many of your partnerships in the type of service and community service that you get in the event that they happen to go away. And also welcome new ideas, please. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. New partners. It doesn't have to be the same folk. Sometimes your program needs change. They should change, I think. Sometimes your community changes, who you serve changes. So be open to that. And also, I think media is another good resource. Use your media to help promote your Ross program. And like I said, when I ran my other program, whatever I was doing, I sent a press release. They didn't come all the time, but they did. Like sometimes there's slow media days, and then my little stuff get on the TV. I mean, my mother would call, I saw you on TV. So you never know who can pick up your stuff and help promote your program. Okay, next. Okay. Next slide. Oh, it's me.
You got to do it yourself.
It's hard to keep good hair.
It's hard.
Oh, somebody even changed that ain't what I had. Okay, sustainability. I really want to talk about sustaining your program. So important. Like, for instance, and I just, Trey told me to be cautious with this. No, I will. I just want to ask this question. It's just a hypothetical question. How many of you feel like if your program would go away if HUD went away? Show of hands. If your funding would go away, Ross would go away if HUD went away. So let me ask the question again because you didn't hear me. If the funding went away, how many of your Ross programs would go away? Not good. Not good. Not good. So one of the things I just wanted to spend just a couple of 2 minutes saying is that, start asking your agency that question as an agency. Because why would you want this incredible program that serves the needs of so many people, that lives have been enriched and been enhanced by this program? Just because your funding source go away, the program has to go away for the families. So start thinking about maybe ways, we're not going anywhere. Don't nobody go right out saying I done said that, because you're not going anywhere. But what I'm saying is it's something that you need to start, thinking about, and then develop a sustainability plan. Just start thinking about, what if I were to lose the YMCA or the Girls Club or this resource or that resource or the work or this GED organization to provide this? How would I then find other partners to support that or to replace that valuable resource that's so important to our families? So just start giving some thought to that. And then start identifying local, state, and national partners who could provide resources. Because I hear a lot of you saying, I'm going to have to bring this up. I'm not going to point out who said it. A lot of people tell me, well, can we buy refreshments, food with our Ross? I heard that about 15 times, in the 16th answer is no, you can't do that. But that may be something that you need. So if, that was on my other slide, but I wanted to mention that may be a partner that you need. And then when I go out and look at your resource list, and I don't see Walmart or Target or Kroger or some of these other folk. HEB, I think, is up in this area. I don't see them as community partners. Maybe you need to figure out having different folks, different things, and sustain that. Okay. Start tracking funding trends, and I brought that. And then our government and federal priorities, because sometimes our priorities shift. Don't get just stuck in thinking that, this is a kind of an every year thing and it happens and you're going to be the one that it happens to. So just don't always think that. Start thinking about maybe ways to kind of diversify your funding and look other partners that can add things to your program to sustain it. And then from time to time, just keep the plan updated. Okay. Time up. Okay. You didn't even see her over there. I know you did.
Pamela says she didn't see the timekeeper.
She didn't see the timekeeper.
I think she did.
I promise I wasn't ignoring you. I'm so sorry.
So we're gonna have some time for questions, but I actually kind of wanted to hop into. Do you have a question? I saw someone. Okay, so I'll go back to questions. So if you can make your way to the mic if you have a question, we're going to take 1 or 2 questions, and we're actually going to go into a table discussion. But I want to kind of echo what Charles was saying, because I think while we hope that funding for Ross coordinators is a way to leverage more funding. And I think what was important, what Pamela was talking about with Choice Neighborhood, is that's $30 million that they're leveraging or that they're getting from HUD, but they're leveraging so much more money just because of how much money is being funded through HUD. So use this as a way to leverage more resources and funding, because some folks maybe in the room may have made a mistake on the application or forgot to apply by the application deadline, because I totally forgot, and you're just out of a year or 2 years of funding. And that has happened and is a very sad thing. But then what happens to your Ross program? And you want to be able to make sure that you prepare for those times where a mistake may happen or there's not enough funding to go around, and you're able to still sustain your programs. And it may look different. So I see you have a question from Oakland Housing Authority.
Yes, because if we lose our Ross funding, I don't have a job. Okay, but you all work on that part.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I just have a couple of comments about the partnerships. building those collaborative partnerships are really key. We have been fortunate at the Oakland Housing Authority in identifying specifically, because we ran our reports on our targeted audience, which are our residents. And when we ran the report on our audience, it helped us to see what kind of constituents, residents we were working with, which helped us to build that partnership. And then we have found that because we were successful in building the right kind of partnerships, many of those same partnerships, when they had excess grant funds to use every year, they contacted us to come to our site to help them get rid of those funds, because we have been successful in building those relationships. We had one event pertaining to health, and we ended up with 23 collaborations out of that at that event to help bring various resources. And yes, no two organizations were the same. We targeted one of each specific area pertaining to health to help meet the needs of the residents, and again, driven around the Ross guidelines. So that was really great to know that that was also something that we were doing right, because we were targeting everything based upon who our residents were, from zero age, from new birth up to the oldest senior being 91 years of age. So that was really great, and that's really a strong, viable tool in running your reports on knowing who your residents are and building your program areas and the resources with the collaborations to bring to your housing units and or other organizations. So I'm really glad to hear that was successful and we were on the right track. Thank you.
Nice. That is awesome. And I think one thing to note that Charles said, and Charles has been saying some like golden nugget things. He's been hilarious, but he's been saying some really good things. But it's really about new ideas, and don't be afraid about new ideas. I think about a time where my funding could not pay for a community garden. And the residents wanted a community garden. They thought it would just be something that they wanted for nutrition purposes, for workforce development purposes, for just to get rid of an eyesore in the community. And they really wanted that community garden, but my funds could not pay for it. And it took me having a conversation with a hospital. And that was a difficult, year-long conversation. But we got, I think it was about $30,000 to fund a community garden, and that money has leveraged more funding after that. But it really was about new ideas, because I would have went to the Housing Authority, I would have went to the Community Development Corporation and said, give us funding for a community garden. They would have said, no, we do funding around housing. So it's really about how do you look to new partners that could be able to do some of the things that maybe your funding won't be able to pay for. So at your table, we're going to take 5 to 7 minutes to do this. So at your tables, many of you guys are addressing areas of need. If you're a FY18 grantee, if you're not an FY18 grantee, you can still participate, but specifically talk at your table about what areas of need you're addressing, what partners and what services and or match are they providing, what partners you have at the table, who's missing from that table, what may be missing from that table, and what you can do to strengthen your collective impact approach. So we can take 5 minutes at your table, and you guys can discuss that. So if we can come back together. I hear the excitement. So I'm going to ask one or two people to share out if they don't mind coming to the mic. I know a few folks are very excited to share something at their table about our questions, what areas of need you're addressing, who your partners, and what services or match they're providing, who's missing from the table, and what you can do to strengthen your collective impact approach. Do I have a volunteer that wants to share out? No volunteers? There we go.
The latest and greatest, we've just entered a collaborative with Great Bay Community College. They're going to fund certificate programs and guarantee employment and pay all costs through Health and Human Services for daycare, gasoline, uniforms, clothing, and food for the entire family while they're in training, and they're guaranteed a $40,000 a year job after completing the certificate.
That's awesome. That is a very solid, and forget your name, but we met this morning. Oh, yes, his name is John Kennedy. How can I forget that? And think about that. Now all he really has to do is, one, make sure that those residents are being connected to all of those services. That's like that may be a bit tough, but at least the coordination piece is really where he can focus a lot of his energy. Do I have one more person that would like to share out? Someone's burning and they're nervous. I think there's someone around. Oh, there we go. And can you state what area of need you're addressing? Well, state where you're from, your housing authority or organization.
I have a question.
Okay.
And my table made me come up here,
Okay.
so I'm not shying by any means. But anyway, my question was, I'm Samuel White. That's who I am. I'm with the Clearwater Housing Authority, and I've been doing this for about a year and a half. I still consider myself a rookie. My question was in regards to the partnerships. I have great partnerships, but when it comes to the piece where HUD says, okay, you need to qualify that relationship or partnership with a memorandum of understanding, it's like when you're dealing with an organization and all the different levels of that organization, I have a good rapport at the place where I need to be, where that organization is coming in and they're providing all these great services for the residents, but the memorandum of understanding goes to another person. And now it's that person trying to say, hey, that person looking at the memorandum saying, what is this? It's legalese. It's, and why are we signing this? It's like, how do you get to that, or how do you overcome that hurdle? How do you deal with that challenge where you continue to incorporate those relationships and they're actually formalized in that way and everybody's happy and HUD says, hey, you guys are doing a great job. I know I'm doing a great job, but HUD don't know I'm doing a great job till I get those memorandums. So I'm like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that challenge? How do you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, that kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier about the executive director comes when the mayor's around the table and everyone's shaking their head saying, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to put all these resources on the table, but then they go away and the commitment doesn't get firmed up. And so what I recommend you do is peer pressure. So every partner is going to play a role. They're going to offer some resources. Create a comprehensive grid of those resources with the executive director's name on it and the commitment that they said they would make in that first meeting, second meeting, small meeting in their office. Put it together, and then every correspondent send that out. These are the commitments that were made. So one, it becomes public that the commitment was made. Then you go to the meeting with the executive director, with your frontline staff, and with their legal department if necessary, and then talk about your boilerplate memorandum of agreement that's asking them to sign that they will do these things to the extent possible. You have to have that language in your agreement. because if they lose their funding, they don't want to legally be held responsible for it. But to the extent possible, I'm going to do these things within this period of time. And so then it should match what is on that grid. And then you continue to hold them accountable. Don't just put the memorandum in a file. Don't just put your grid in a file. Check in every quarter. Are we on target? Are we getting resources from you? Is there a challenge to your providing resources to our residents? Is there something more we can do to help you produce what you committed to? But peer pressure works.
And you'll be often surprised how many people have grants that have to serve our exact residents. And so it may be good to also find out who have to serve low-income or public housing residents, because then they may be a really good resource when it comes to providing those direct services or partnerships or MOUs. And you'll be also surprised at your organizations what MOUs exist. There are MOUs at HUD that I have no clue about, and then we find out much later, right? And so you'll be surprised even at your organization what MOUs may exist, and really talk to whomever is doing that to figure out how you can strengthen your partnerships if that may not be you. And then I'm going to take it a step further to also talk about informal partnerships, and I actually don't mind them if it gets the job done, but MOUs are very important, and I felt Pamela looking at me, but I really...
No, well, I didn't hear you all the way, so I was just looking.
Well, I was talking about informal partnerships.
Oh, okay.
Can be very helpful, and especially when it doesn't involve sometimes senior management that will get in the way, make it a political thing, make it,
Yeah.
and get into neighborhood politics or what have you, and really get in the way of the goal that's in mind. With that, it is your break time, and so we want you to come back at 3:45, and we're going to have our last session talking about financial coaching.